A very good afternoon to our viewers at home and around the world. Welcome. This is Afro Worldview here on Channel 405. It's What's Not Making Headlines. I'm Thabo Baloyi. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, let's take a look at what's making headlines. Well, hundreds gather at the University of Johannesburg to bid farewell to South African rapper Linda Pro-Kid Mkhize. The chief executive of the South African Post Office, Mark Barnes, has been summoned by the Telecommunications Ministry, and the state capture inquiry writes to former President Jacob Zuma to ask whether he'll testify in person. Well, hundreds of South Africans have gathered at the University of Johannesburg in Soweto for the funeral service of late hip-hop artist Linda Pro-Kid Mkhize. Well, he passed away on the 8th of August after suffering from a seizure. He's been dubbed as the pioneer of hip-hop. Pro-Kid is widely acknowledged by artists and music lovers as one of the most influential artists who shaped hip-hop music in South Africa. He released 6 albums. His Heads and Tails album is still being recognized as one of the biggest. With that, we're going to take a short break. Do stay with us. Good day and welcome to What's Not Making Headlines, a show that focuses on important stories that mainstream news publications possibly overlooked. My name is Thabo Baloyi. I will be joined, as always, by a variety of guests taking you through various stories that should be dominating the headlines. Well, if you'd like to weigh in on the conversations and perhaps yourself know of a story you might have missed, do give us a ring. The number is 011 542 1046. Well, this is our first story. The recent passing of Rhodes University student Khensani Maseko has put under the spotlight the violation of women by their partners. Maseko committed suicide after allegedly being raped by her boyfriend. Now, following the incident, social media went into a frenzy, with some asking how one could be raped by the intimate partner. Online media house Naijozi caught up with a woman who says she was raped by the father of her child after having ended their relationship. Let's listen to that conversation.
What was in my mind is that, okay, we are here to talk.
Of course.
And then fine, the child slept on my arms. As I went to put her on bed, he followed me apparently. He followed me. And then he said, can we have sex? And I said, I can't have sex with you. Me and you. There's nothing.
No longer in a relationship.
I can't have sex with you. I mean, no. The last time I checked on Dasekaya, I was wearing my pants. And then last time I checked, I was wearing my dress. Last time I checked, I was naked. Fine, in that nakedness, everyone, like, as much as I cried and screamed, no one heard me. Only because right at the back there was Umkiti.
Okay.
So everyone is there, celebration, Umkiti. So I cried. As I cried, the next thing that happened, my child was up, and then the next thing that happened was of me seeing myself in this lounge why the door wide open, naked. I said, I'm naked. The door was wide open, and then he said to me, you know, if my friends were to come in here, 10 of them, we are going to kill you. If I don't get you, no one will. I was like, oh, okay. I kept on crying because like, I'm like, even my phone was ringing. He took this phone and bang on the wall. See? And then from there, like, beautiful that we have this couch here. This couch, you see here, these are bruises. You see those small bricks that you build houses with? Yeah, these are bruises of those bricks. There's no way I can fall and get bruises in these places. So he took me and set me in this chair. He took my leg and the other leg to the other side. If I'm trying to close my legs so that he cannot take pictures of my devana, then he will start banging this brick on my. Do you get my point? And then, of course,
that you can
open.
Oh my God!
And so he can take pictures of my devana. And then
is this now happening after he's raped you?
It's happening. It's the sole sin of rape.
So is it done forcing himself on you, and now he wants to take pictures of?
And he's doing more. There's even more to it. Wait for me. Okay, and then the worst part of it, it's that I thought he's only taking the pictures, and then the next thing he was like opening my and taking pictures again. It's fine. As I was looking at that situation, he was with a bottle of vodka next to him. He decided, I'm taking this bottle and I'm putting it in. No. And then he was like, and then I would feel like in my bones, like, okay, this is the end of it. Until my child started crying. She was sitting right next to me then. Sitting right next to me. This guy, okay, it's fine. She's 9 months old. She was watching like she's watching some sort of a cinema. Like, before all that, before all these pictures and situation, this guy forced himself onto me twice.
Well, we are joined by Thembela Mnisi, who's the presenter you see on that clip, the show On the Spot on Naijozi TV, as well as Buyisile Ngcina, who's a counseling psychologist, for further clarity on the story. Thank you so much. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here. You know, I've got to say, I mean, I looked at the full-length interview. It was about half an hour. Yeah. I was captured by her resilience and, you know, her spirit. What was your takeaway from that conversation?
I loved the fact that she's just a forgiving individual. I really think she's a forgiving individual. And she's very strong. She's a very strong woman. Because all the things that she went through, the only thing, she was also thinking about her kid, but she was also thinking about how she's going to escape. But, you know, I really think she's a strong individual. I think that was my take on her, I really think. Because she's very young as well. With her going through all of that at such a young age, it was really, really hectic.
And, you know, as she talks about how it really does sort of shine a spotlight on, you know, what constitutes rape. Remember with the Khensani Maseko story, which we linked to this story, was that, you know, she was raped by a boyfriend, which really was for me, I definitely was not expecting that. And people, we really tend to ignore those kind of dynamics, you know, because usually with rape, it's somebody you don't know, somebody you know, the circumstances are, from the narrative, the circumstances are quite linear, quite similar. This was really a very interesting story. And, you know, her qualities and her ability to really endure really does speak volumes. But do we know who was the first person, if you remember, the first person she spoke to regarding the rape? It
was the aunt, if I remember well. I think it was the aunt that she spoke to about the rape. Because when she got to the house first, she was like just talking to the aunt, and she was explaining to the aunt, this is what happened. Because it was just after the rape scene, and then she was running home, and she got there, and she was like, this is what happened. And, you know, I think it's growing. The number of people being raped by family members is actually growing, and now it was her baby daddy that actually raped her. Now that was more hectic, but she spoke to her aunt first.
Okay, let's bring in Buyisile Ngcina into the conversation. She's a counseling psychologist to help us really make sense of this. Thank you for your time. She was obviously in a really, really dark place, but you know, she's emerged out of it quite stronger. She's got this sort of new leash on life, and she's teaching teaching, she's spreading the word to similar victims. But how does one tap into that psyche? Because, you know, it's really interesting considering how she managed to sort of get over. Perhaps your analysis on that.
All right, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think just before I start, I would like to suspend the strength. The reason for this is because it's not a common thing, and oftentimes rape survivors feel the need to rush themselves into a process of strength and forgiveness and not necessarily allowing for the anger to take form. So in terms of what I've seen in her, firstly, we need to understand the context of rape within current and former relationships. The first being that with sexual relationships or with romantic partners, men tend to have a lingering sense of entitlement and propriety on the female body. This is why, therefore, there exists no consent for me. If I want to be intimate with you, as my woman, you are to serve me in this kind of manner. So for us, we have to look at that context in terms of shining a light on what happens in terms of the diagnostic. First and foremost, the survivor is kind of put under post-traumatic stress after the incident, and within the context of that rape or sexual violation, they go through kind of different stages at that point. Kubler-Ross speaks about grief and loss, and when I listened to the clip, you could clearly trace the shock, the denial, the anger, the potential negotiation with her former partner to kind of gain a sense of, why am I being subjected to this? Because also we see that even from the perpetrator, there is that sense of hatred that's influenced by a failing relationship and the desire to make her suffer even beyond kind of their own interaction. So there's quite a lot that is happening there diagnostically and in terms of social understanding.
Okay, Buyisile, I'll bring you back in just a moment. I just want to talk about what I took issue with here. I don't know if that's reflected in the clip. Is the fact that, you know, she decided to drop the charges. So this man, essentially, he escaped the whip of justice, which is another issue on its own. I mean, yes, she spoke about her mental and her well-being and her ability to forgive him. And she says that, in the court of public opinion, yes, he'll always be considered guilty. And he'll be, I think, she said something to the effect of, he's in his own jail now in dealing with what she's had to do.
I completely understand where she's coming from. She says that the biggest punishment for him, it would be the fact that she's talking about this and people just know the kind of person that he is now. But what she didn't want is for her baby to grow up without her dad. So that's what she says. She's like, I didn't want to punish him to that extent because I wanted my baby to still have a dad. But I completely understood the fact that she said, even if he does go to jail, it wasn't enough for her. Now, to speak about this and for people to know the kind of person that he is, and then he's walking there in town, everywhere he's walking, people know the kind of person that he is. She thought that's good enough punishment for her.
Okay, Buyisile, before I let you go, I'm being told we're running out of time. Firstly, just a quick one. What does that do to sort of interpersonal relationships for Sindisiwa, how does she approach intimacy? How does she approach connection? Because, as far as rape is concerned, usually if it's done by somebody who's not your intimate partner, I guess it's kind of easier when there's that intimacy barrier with somebody else. But given her circumstance, this was done by a man she'd known for a very long time. How does she approach intimacy in light of all of this?
Sure, it's going to be very difficult for her to do that. But she said to me that it's actually easier for her because she's forgiven him completely and she's actually dealt with the situation. She's actually engaged now, So it means that she's completely fine with this thing. But then with different women as well, it becomes more difficult for women to be intimate with any other partner, and they actually don't trust men anymore, because you don't know how to trust this man who you felt this is your partner, this is a person that you can put all your trust in, and this is the same person that hurts you at the end of the day. So it's going to be difficult for her to actually now move on and be intimate with somebody else and just, you know, and love that person to the extent of saying, okay, I trust this person genuinely, completely, and this person won't do this to me again, you know. But she's engaged now, so I mean, that means she's just completely moved on from that. But with other women, you'd never really know what's going to happen.
At the end of the tunnel, or at least for her.
There is light at the end of the tunnel, definitely.
Right, continuing from in other news now, we're looking at the case of a missing fisherman. 26-year-old Derek van Blark is said to have been returning from illegally catching crayfish near Cape Point when police intercepted his boat shooting at the engine. He has since been missing, while his 2 associates were arrested and later released on bail. Well, for more on this story, we have Kimmen de Greef, a freelance journalist who covered this story for Ground Up. We'll also be talking to IPID spokesperson Mr. Moses Dlamini about the investigations into the matter. Kimmen, thank you so much for your time. Perhaps take us through the story. How did you come across it?
Hi, thank you for having me on the show. So I've been covering fishing-related and poaching-related stories in Hout Bay for about 7 years now, and so whenever one of these incidents flares up, people I know in the community tend to call. So I heard about this on the Saturday morning after Derek went missing. And it very quickly became a hot news story because people got really angry and staged a protest in the harbour, and you know, the rest sort of followed from there. But it's not the first time that people have mobilized around a fisheries issue, a perceived injustice, and the root kind of causes are pretty much the same. Year on year, something happens to spark off a protest like this.
And you know, also the circumstances are kind of different because he was illegally catching crayfish.
Yes, absolutely. So the situation in Hamburg and many other fishing settlements like it is very few people have formal access or legal access to marine resources, at least not enough to base a livelihood on. And this has been the situation in the case of the crayfish industry for generations in Hamburg. So you've got people whose grandfathers put extra bread on the table by catching crayfish illegally on the side. So it's a very, very deeply ingrained illegal economy. Certainly doesn't warrant the use of excessive force, such as Derek's 2 accomplices are alleging happened. So I'm very curious to see what happens if his body is found, because they allege that he was shot during the chase when the boat was shot out, the engines were shot out, and I've seen, and Ground Up has published photographs of the engine and the pontoons of their vessel with dozens of bullet holes in it. So it's plausible that an accident happened, and if it did, that's certainly not a justifiable casualty. You know, even though it is illegal, this is a subsistence for hundreds of people there.
All right, Kimmen, much appreciated there. Thank you so much for your time. That's Ground Up journalist Kimmen de Greef, who covered the story, giving us just more details. Now, moving on now to another story. Street traders in Ermelo, Mpumalanga, have accused local police and Home Affairs officials of xenophobia. Street vendors claim that although they used to receive permits to trade after applying, as well as paying an additional 50 Rand fee, this suddenly came to an end in January this year. They claim they're now facing harassment from the authorities. Reports on hate crime indicated that anti-immigrant violence sours the country's relationship with the rest of the continent. For example, relations between South Africa and Nigeria, one of the region's largest economies, have deteriorated due to the recent attacks of Nigerians by South Africans. Now, for more on this story, we seem to be experiencing a bit of a technical glitch there. Well, for more on the story, we are joined by Nation, the journalist. Thank you so much for your time. How did you come across this story?
The story was actually presented by a colleague who was contacted by the Lawyers for Human Rights, and they just were also having some issues with dealing with the story, and they were requiring, the story to be aired out. So that's how I stumbled on it.
And I mean, really, it's quite startling, but really no surprise here. But the extent of these claims that, excuse me, that they are being victimized. Let's look at that. The extent of these allegations.
I mean, for the most part, when I went there around July, and the grievances that they had was that they were being harassed. Some of their stalls that they've set up were being kicked around. Some of their stuff was being repossessed, and they would, or confiscated rather, and they would have to go and claim those back. According to the municipal bylaws that I went through, it should be a fine of 1,000 rand that's imposed in order to repossess your goods or to get them back. However, that wasn't the case. Some of them were made to pay as much as 1.5, which, as you can imagine, with the financial climate that they're in, it's not really easy to come up with that kind of amounts of money. Yes.
And so, I mean, when you look at this, case, constitutionally there has to be these are gross violations, and the ripple effect. Looking at this, one of the most prominent examples being Nigeria, the ripple effect is that does sort of have sort of hamper relations between countries, because you've got these sort of socio-economic factors that you also have to consider, and the ripple effect being the economy, jobs, bilateral sort of relations, and we tend to really not look at that, especially when you talk about xenophobic attacks, and those kinds of sentiments are sort of difficult to express to South Africans when they're angry and they're enraged and they're taking to the streets.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So what do you make of this?
I think I was not, but although I think for me as a human rights activist, there are human rights evaluation, especially when you look at the issue related to the municipality bylaws. And I must indicate that the street vendors are being abused in most of the cases. For instance...
You're speaking generally and not just...
I'm speaking general.
All right.
Yes, but I'm speaking general because now I've tried maybe sometimes to intervene, because you see my problem was that is to bring all these informal traders together and form one federation so that they can speak one voice, because the gist of the matter is, they are able to deal with them because they are working as, groups. But as a federation, I think they can go somewhere.
All right.
I was going to say, you'd actually find that a lot of street traders are very organized. So when I was there was a man who was representing them. It was about, I think he said, under the people who was, the list of people that he had in good standing, the members were around 250, if not above that. So that also shows you that they are very organized in terms of voicing out their grievances and trying to appeal to the municipality to take their, to take them into consideration rather. So it's a very, very difficult situation in terms of, as you said, relations amongst countries. So it's not only the Mozambicans as well as the Swatis who are having their rights infringed. It's as well Nigeria, the DRC, people who are coming here specifically from war-torn countries. So it's not a situation where they can perhaps go back. It's a situation where it's very dire.
Absolutely.
100%, yeah.
Absolutely, much appreciated. Thank you so much for your time. But sir, I know you're going to stay for the last story, I believe.
Okay, yes.
All right, yes. Now let's continue now. Just recently, Judge President Dustin Mlombo ordered a full bench of the courts to sort out the tangle of inconsistent home repossession judgments. Mlombo also wants the courts to establish under what circumstances judges should set reserve prices on repossessed homes. Court rules were changed late last year to allow judges to set reserve prices when homes are sold at auctions to stop them from being sold at a fraction of their worth. Despite this, some courts in Gauteng continue to authorize the auctioning of houses known as sale in executions without reserve prices. The forthcoming case will clarify how and when judges should set those reserve prices. For more on the story, we are joined by King Sibiya of the Lungelo Lethu Human Rights Foundation. The foundation has gone to court in a case that will have implications for homeowners struggling to pay their bond. Thank you so much for your time, Lungelo, once again. Much appreciated. Perhaps just talk us through what's happened here.
First and foremost, I want to thank you for inviting me to be here. I think maybe before I can talk about the reserve price, I need to indicate that since then we have seen there are properties that are sold for lesser price than its market value. In our own view, it's unconstitutional to sell these properties without a reserve price. Because in actual fact, in this country, we have a Valuation Act, which is governing all the evaluation. You know, any property that is go for liquidation or for administration of disease of the estate, there must be a valuation. Now, for instance, in the banks, where the banks now are owed 10,000, and then the property, it means, is going to be sold on auction for 10,000, which is for us is unconstitutional. But therefore, in 2006, we have approached the Rules Board to amend the law so that we compel the judges to have a reserve price. So I'm happy to say it's a landmark today because last year the Government Gazette was erected to ensure that there's a reserve price.
Well, where do you think this stems from? The fact that now the Judge President has ordered this, where does this sort of cataclysm, where does this come from? You know, leading up to now, you've reached a point where, you know, they have to sort out all these home repossession settlements and how they should be particularly constituted. I mean, yes. How did we come to this point?
Yeah, now, the most important thing already, because there's a gazette on that effect. So the judges, what they want to do, they want to set up now what we call it manual practice. In other words, it means a directive, because the court works with a directive. So therefore, it means this directive by the Judge President, there are rules in terms of, there are rules 14 that gives the Judge President to give a directive. So the purpose of sitting on the 20th and the 28th and the 29th is to set up the reserve price so that it is guiding the rest of the judges so that how to determine the reserve price. Because I think it's critical because you see the issue of the reserve price, what I'm saying is that end of the day, before we used to say, because it's not only about the issue of the reserve price also, but it's also in court, we are going to argue that the banks before, because it's a last resort, the reserve price. Before the reserve price, there should be processes and efforts that need to be done by bank. For argument's sake, for 6 months, you know, looking at your account, is it feasible? Because some of the other people who told you find that is only owed a bank for 2 months, and then he can pay back that money. So all those things. So there are processes that need to be done. The reserve price is going to be the last resort. But what I'm happy about it is that if then the reserve price is there, at least we are able, whether I lose my house, but at least I'm going to get something to start a new life somewhere. So that's all about.
All right, Mr. Sibiya, much appreciated. We will be keeping an eye on that story here on AfroAudio. Thank you so much.
Yes, because we'll be going to court on the 28th and the 29th.
Absolutely, we will be keeping an eye on
and
that
also,
story.
thank you so much because I think for us it's a great landmark because we have been suffering about these things, this property be sold for legalist tenders. But I think for now, once there's a directive of court, I think things will be coming right. Thank you so much for having me. As I've said.
And that's how we leave things here on What's Not Making Headlines. A few glitches, we do apologize for that. And we're going to take a short break. Up next, your news.